What's going on? Why are these men looking at me?
Yeah, they're also staring at me.
Wait, what?
Why are these men looking at me? Why are these men looking at me? Why are these men looking at me?
Why are these men looking at me?
I'm approaching the Barbie 2023 movie with complete transparency. I didn't watch any reviews before watching this movie. I didn't hear what other people had to say about it. I just wanted to go in and give it a chance. And it's completely weird coming from me, somebody who grew up as a tomboy who absolutely despised Barbies. I mean, I'm the kind of person that would pop off their heads and throw the head on one side of the yard and pop off the legs and throw one of the legs in the pool and in the trash and the torso just somewhere else. I really, really hated them, and I have no idea why. I just really despise dolls in general. The only time I ever sat down to play with Barbies was with my best friend. She loved Barbies. She had an entire Barbie collection of over 200 Barbies. And because I loved her so much, I was willing to put aside my absolute hatred of these things for her. But other than that, it's not my thing. That being said, I did like Margot Robbie, and I decided to give her movie a chance because the way that they tried to market this movie was not how the movie was. I did not expect it to be what it turned out to be, and I'll get into that in a second. So I'm going to highlight the summary of the movie, and I'm also going to then go into the good things about the movie, and then I'm going to go into the bad things about the movie, and then I'm going to give my overall thoughts on the movie and why it's annoying, where I think it could have worked, and where they just completely missed the ball. Before even going into that any further, I know I did look at reviews, and I did look at some of the headlines later, because after I watched the movie, I had my own opinion, and I was also curious what other people were thinking, because I thought maybe I was the only one who felt that way. Come to find out, the articles are saying stuff like Republicans can't stand the Barbie movie, and I'm very confused as to why every time a movie is critiqued in a negative light, it is always almost either white men or Republicans for some reason that are the problem. Me, as someone who does not fit either of those things, I thought it was a trash movie. It wasn't the worst movie out there, but I also thought it was a trash movie, and I feel like people like me, or who look like me, our voices are completely negated and don't seem to matter. It's like they completely ignore us. It's just weird. Anyway, so Barbie is a movie, of course, centering around stereotypical Barbie, played by Margot Robbie. She is perfect. She lives in Barbie Land. Barbie Land is an imaginary world, basically adjacent to the real world, and the Barbies and Kens that live there live out their lives parallel to how they're being played with in the real world by their girls or whoever is playing with them. The movie also started out with this strange prologue of this woman speaking, saying how little girls, as if little girls were the only things that existed in prehistoric times, would play with baby dolls, and then they trashed their baby dolls in a very weird fit of toxic violence because they saw a giant life-sized Barbie, and she's not even life-size, she's like way bigger than them. She came down from on high, and they saw her in a striped zebra bathing suit, and they're like, you know what? I don't want to play with baby dolls anymore. I want to play with women. I want to look like that. And that's all fine and dandy. So Barbie basically changed the world. And the Barbies in Barbie Land are aware of this. They're aware that they are Barbies, that they're being played with, but I do like that they didn't go the Toy Story angle with it. Basically, how you would see your toy with your imagination living out their lives is how it's portrayed with these Barbies in Barbie Land. So when she's drinking or eating, there's nothing coming out of the cup. She's not actually eating anything because she's a Barbie. She's not an actual human. Anyway, everything is perfect, and then something messes up Barbie's flow. She starts having thoughts of death, and she starts getting depressed. And ever since she starts having these thoughts, she begins to see them manifest in the forms of cellulite, or her feet going flat and not staying arched like the Barbie's feet usually look, so they can fit into heels. So being someone who likes structure and routine, she's like, I gotta fix this. She tells her Barbie friends, all the other women there are Barbie and all the other Kens there are Ken, and she has to end up going to the real world to talk to her girl to figure out what's going on. The Kens play a significant role in this movie as well, and I say that haltingly, because even though they do play a significant role, or Ryan Gosling's Ken plays a significant role, he is more so presented as the antagonist for some reason, and I get it. I liked where they were going with it, but he starts off as someone who absolutely loves Barbie, and she does not feel the same way about him. It's not not her fault, but you could see he is in turmoil because of it, this unrequited love. He doesn't know who he is without Barbie. So he hitches a ride with her out of the imaginary world into the real world, and they have to figure out what's going on, and Ken wants to help her. But as he's in the real world, he notices that people just respect him for just being him. Implication there being that because he's a man, everyone, all around, female and male, just automatically just give him respect because he's a man, which is quite odd because that's not necessarily what happens in the real world. Anyway, Barbie, on the flip side of this, is treated like an object, and it's not just, oh, men are ogling her or saying, oh, you're very pretty. They're saying the most obscene things and acting in the most obscene ways. When Ken sees masculinity, he's never been presented with this before, so he notices all these things that were just completely alien to him, and now it's programmed his mind to want that. And it's weird how they present it being an issue, because the montage that he sees, men in business suits, cops on horses, Sylvester Stallone, the Western movies, superhero movies, I guess those are supposed to be things that are supposed to make it worrisome, but for me, it just gave me delight seeing those things because I think they're cool. In the same way it would give me delight seeing Ripley or one of those anime characters, those female anime characters kicking someone's ass. Like, it's the same thing. I think there is beauty on both sides, so it's weird that they just highlight that. But I understand from Ken's point of view, seeing all this for the first time, seeing men in positions of power would look pretty alluring to him, since in Barbie Land he is submissive, and honestly, all the Kens are just there as decoration. They don't really give anything to society. They're just like pets. But anyway, he goes back to Barbie Land because he's like, this is great. And before he does that, he goes to the library and picks up all these books on patriarchy. The amount of times patriarchy is mentioned in this movie. If I were drinking alcohol and I had to take a shot every time, my womb would have been falling out of my body by now. I know that makes no freaking sense, but I would have had like stage 100 kidney disease and my womb would have fallen out my body and obliterated into ash with how freaking diseased I would be if I had to take a shot every time they said patriarchy in this freaking movie. It was so weird. Anyway, long and short of it, Barbie figures out what's going on. It was some woman who was disrespected by her daughter because she doesn't know how to be a mother, and she was having those thoughts, and those thoughts kind of entwined with Barbie's thoughts. She's the one that designs all the new Barbie stuff, and that's why it was manifesting on Barbie. She ends up talking to the creator of Barbie, Ruth Handler, and Ruth tells her, you can be anything you want to be, and then there's this spiel when Barbie goes back to Barbie Land, sees that Ken has taken it over, and honestly, funny enough, call me crazy, but what Ken has done with Barbie Land is 100% cooler than how Barbie Land was. Call me crazy, maybe it's just me, maybe it's my internalized misogyny, but it just looks way more badass. It was so monotonous and lifeless when the Barbies were there. Sure, it was pretty and sparkling, but after doing that day in, day in, day out, it's like, dude, this feels like a freaking cult's wet dream. It was horrible. And I thought the way they were gonna go with the movie was, oh, let's break out of this. Let's try to, there's more to being a woman than just being perfect and pink all the time. I thought that's the way they were gonna go with it. But alas, the Kens bringing that, like they're having their brewskis, whatever the frick that is, mini fridges, all these stereotypically masculine things that women also tend to enjoy, those are seen as problems. And the Kens have taken over and they basically assert their power over Barbie Land. And the funny thing is the Barbies all went along with it. They weren't slaves or anything. They all went along with it. They were attracted to this masculinity. They were like, oh my God, this is hot. I like this. They were actually enjoying the Kens, you know, being assertive and masculine. But Barbie and some of the other discontinued Barbies got together and they said they had to reprogram the Barbies because the Kens infected them with the patriarchy, which is why they're attracted to, like, anyway, the humans, or Barbie's people that were playing with her in the real world, go on this whole thing to save her and help her out, and they decide they're gonna take back the Constitution and stuff from the Kens, and they kidnap some of the Barbies to reprogram or unprogram them from liking the Kens, and like, oh my God, yeah, I did write this. Ugh, I can't believe it. And then they trick the Kens and use their emotions against them when the Kens fall in love with them. And then all the Barbies take back the Constitution and make the Kens fight against each other. The Kens do end up realizing what's going on and they band together. But by that time, it's too late. Barbie Land now belongs to the Barbies again. And the Kens are now back in their submissive roles. And they try to make it seem at the end of the movie like, oh, well, you know, no one should have to live under anyone's shadow. But when the Kens ask for their own, like, Supreme Court and stuff like that, they give them a lesser role. The president, Barbie, made sure to utter the words like, no, we're gonna start you off with something small first. Like, you can be equal to us, but you can't really be equal to us. You can't really have all the rights that we have. Just after she said, no one's gonna live in anyone's shadow. Which I guess is supposed to be some kind of allegory or analogy for how women are in the real world, which is not really the case because it's kind of the other way around. I don't know why recognizing all of that makes someone a Republican or a religious nut or whatever. It's strange. But anyway, that was the movie in a very large nutshell. Was it man-hating? Yeah, kinda. It was actually very stereotypically, nauseatingly disrespectful to not just men, but to women, because in trying to basically empower women and say that the patriarchy is the reason why women feel sad or have to live up to men's standards. You know, them saying all of that basically takes away the power from women, because they're basically saying we don't have any autonomy. And if we like a man or are attracted to him being masculine, it's because of the man. It's because we can't think for ourselves and we're programmed and easily programmable and easily taken advantage of because we're stupid. Like, it was just so insulting to me as a woman to watch this. I don't know if a woman wrote it, and honestly, I know this is so freaking on the nose saying this, considering that most people would say this about my review, but that is giving misogyny, whether a woman wrote it or not. Because if I decide to like a guy, and funny enough, Ken, when he was more masculine, he's still a douchebag, but when he was acting a little bit more masculine, I was like kind of hot. And for someone to tell me that something is wrong with me, or the reason I feel my feelings is because men programmed me to feel that way, is very dehumanizing, in my opinion, and very misogynistic. Just saying. Whether you're a woman or a man. Because how dare I, you know, find that attractive. And it's interesting. Anyway, we're gonna move on for that, because that was the overview, the summary of the movie. Now, don't get me wrong, there were some good things about the movie. There were some jokes that landed and some scenes that were legitimately funny enough to elicit a giggle. Ken was one of the best things about it, as was Barbie, and I'm probably biased to saying that because I do love Margot Robbie. The world was very colorful, the characters were very chipper and quirky, the musical sequences in the movie were surprisingly enjoyable, if I were to give it a word. They gave off this vibe akin to some theatrical performance, something I'd associate with like Broadway, despite never having been to a Broadway performance, but I've seen clips of it, and this film seemed to align with that aesthetic. It looks like they actually put some work into this movie, like some actual effort, and they did a good job at least making it seem original, along with the original songs that were made for it, especially the Ken song, which is my favorite, coming right off the coattails of Bowser there.
Doesn't seem to matter what I do.
Another thing I liked is, despite sharing the name Barbie, each character manages to exude a distinct personality. Part of the movie's appeal, obviously though, stems from its nostalgic charm for those who once played with Barbies, as well as the whole eye-catching appeal to the younger people captivated by all the pink glittery stuff. The movie does land some resonant moments, like the part where Barbie is realizing her desire for the human experience at the end, acknowledging that perfection isn't everything, even though she still ends up being kind of perfect. I do think that there were ways they could have executed this messaging better, but for the type of shallow movie that this is, you can forgive it. As I said before just now, Margot Robbie is easily the best thing about this movie, and even though the script wasn't the best, I think she really put her all into the role as Barbie, and I actually believed that she was Barbie. I also really enjoyed Weird Barbie, and the general overall direction in which the story was going initially. The journey sequences from Barbie Land to the real world were cute. I appreciated how the movie didn't feel the need to rationalize or explain the logistics of it all. It just was. Interestingly, in the real world of the movie, people are cognizant of Barbie Land and the existence of Barbies, like being alive, sort of. This opens up a lot of questions. However, as I said before, the film is intended to be whimsical and absurd, akin to something like Idiocracy. So it doesn't take itself too seriously, but it's also not cringe enough to make you want to choke yourself when that's concerned. So let's get into now the bad of the movie.
I'm just kidding. Where I see love, she sees a friend.
Oh boy, you can't have bad thoughts, can't have negative thoughts. But like I said, this is not the worst movie out there. Oh my goodness, was it cringe-inducing for a lot of the situations that happened, or just the dialogue in general. especially when it touched on the whole gender thing, which was like almost 80% of the movie. It makes sense though, considering that Barbie's utopia operates under a matriarchal system. So it's understandable that she'd feel disoriented in the real world where women aren't always in positions of power and men often take on more dominant roles. However, the problem I feel is the execution of the story. They end up making it about the real world that the audience is looking at, and it comes off as preachy and a self-indulged, ham-fisted, deep-throating sermon to any little girl that might be watching, and essentially telling her that the reason things are so difficult for her if she ever does go through difficult situations is because of men. And while there can be something to be said in some instances when it comes to that, especially when you consider social media and some men out there having a problem with old women looking old, but then also having a problem when those women get plastic surgery to try and look younger, even though these individual women have nothing to do with them and don't even know they exist, there seems to be a lack of accountability for women in general in this movie. They make it seem as though throughout the entirety of the movie that anything that happens is because of men, and if a woman is doing it, it's also because of men. By trying to give women back the power in the end, the filmmakers have inadvertently robbed them of it altogether, because the film only manages to showcase the women being absolutely weak and unable to protect their society and uphold their own laws because they were just so easily programmable. It takes away the autonomy of women being able to make their own decisions, and it implies that we as women are just so stupid that if a man just acts like an assertive dude, we'll just lose all sense of ourselves. While there's something to be said for that level of simpery on both sides, it's not the power display that they think it is with the whole message of the movie. Near the end of the movie, all it served to do was inadvertently contribute to damaging stereotypes. On one hand, framing women constantly as victims reinforced the notion that women are inherently vulnerable or weak all the time, unable to navigate the world without external support or protection. But then on the other hand of that, depicting women as inherently superior can lead to this unrealistic and distasteful standard. Everyone, regardless of your gender, has strengths and weaknesses. Asserting the superiority of one gender over the other, all it does is just promotes hostility and inequality, and that is what fosters resentment and intimidation. And at the conclusion of the movie, the society ended up exactly where it started, with the Kens going back to being inferior and stupid. They claim that the Kens, when they ruled, ended up having a war, but it's like the writers forgot that the only reason that the Kens ended up having a war against the other Kens is because the Barbies orchestrated that. They think it's a big win, but actually makes the Barbies look emotionally manipulative and toxic. Weird Barbie and all the others claim that the reason why all the Barbies were falling in love with the Kens is because the Kens programmed them with patriarchy and masculinity, and that's what caused the supposed downfall of their society. But if you actually look closely, which is what's so funny about the whole thing, and I don't know if they meant for this to happen, the society under the Kens, though, was actually flourishing and exhibited more variety and excitement compared with when the Barbies were the ones in power. And I mean, under the Kens, both the Barbies and the Kens were enjoying themselves. I don't see what the issue was. Understandably, though, they do go a little bit overboard and push the envelope with depicting the Barbies being in more subservient roles during this period. But then it implies that it's better if the Kens take on those subservient roles instead. Like, this whole way they portray this doesn't actually mirror the complexities of the real world and all the diversity of roles and relationships that exist in our real world. When everyone's having a party, friends are all hanging out, girls, guys, whatever, right? Everyone is equal. Everyone's drinking, or whatever people that go to parties do. Everyone is playing video games. Everyone is doing this. Everyone's doing that. They all have the same rights. They're just having fun together. In that moment, no one's looking down at the women. No one's looking down at the men. They're all just meeting and shebanging. It would have been distasteful if they made all the women look like the only reason that they were there was for eye candy, even though the irony of all this is in the real world, the reason why this even happens is because women compete with each other to be eye candy for men's validation and attention. No one forces them to become Instagram models or to take thirst trap selfies or to take money from men for their OnlyFans, but also making them just weak damsels in distress all the time is definitely negative and makes their characters look like trash. On the flip side, if men are constantly portrayed negatively or as trash, it reinforces harmful stereotypes about masculinity as well, or the lack thereof. This could contribute to toxic masculinity, the one that people are talking about, where men feel as though they have to adhere to this strict, overbearing societal standard of what it means to be a real man, or that they just have to completely do away with a very natural part of their existence, which is their masculinity, which is kind of what happened with Ken. Ken is treated with such little respect. It's not like they were just mean to him, but nobody respects him. That when he finally received a modicum of respect in the real world, he really struggled to process it. It's like he couldn't handle it. And it could have been a lot worse though, because what they were trying to claim was toxic masculinity throughout the movie was also a man seeing a woman ask for help or acting as though she didn't know anything and him coming over to help her. And that makes no sense to me, because how is it a toxic trait if a man wants to help you? I mean, we as women, when we see children acting the same way, we go over, oh, you need help here, here's how you do it. Does that mean we have toxic femininity? I mean, how is it that toxic when the women who take advantage of this know that they're going to get this kind of attention and they enjoy it, ergo them taking advantage of it? And the reason why they do it is because of these dumb negative portrayals only end up perpetuating this unhealthy dynamic between the genders, painting men as the enemy rather than serving to encourage cooperation and understanding from both sides. What these modern movies seem to miss in terms of like the mark is that balanced, nuanced, supposedly diverse representation in media. And that's important because it allows us to see a spectrum of what it means to be human regardless of your gender. And it encourages us to have empathy for each other and understanding across all those societal divides. Barbie 2023, the movie, unfortunately, just like many of them, have fallen into these pitfalls. So all of this ended up being a missed opportunity to use this powerful platform to promote equality and to change stereotypes, or to point them out, yeah, the stereotypes, because those are a thing, but also to overcome all of that. But they only ended up reinforcing that masculinity is bad, and that is masculinity in every form, even the forms in which it's beautiful. I don't really understand how women who have an issue with masculinity can look at a stallion or a lion and admire how strong and masculine it looks, yet be disgusted at the same levels of masculine display in their own species. And this is how you know the movie has an issue, because there is actually a thought-provoking monologue by America Ferrera. I think that's the name of one of the main characters. She plays the lead human character, the designer for the Barbie doll. When she echoes these thoughts, the Barbies snap out of their programming to like the Kens and want to follow them and just become themselves again. And her monologue reads as this. I'm gonna read it in a stupid accent. It's literally impossible to be a woman. You're so beautiful and so smart, and it kills me that you don't think you're good enough. We have to always be extraordinary, but somehow we're always doing it wrong. You have to be thin, but not too thin. And you can never say that you want to be thin. You have to say you want to be healthy, but you also have to be thin. You have to have money, but you can't ask for money because that's crass. You have to be a boss, but you can't be mean. You have to lead, but you can't squash other people's ideas. You're supposed to love being a mother. Don't talk about your kids all the damn time. You have to be a career woman, but also always be looking out for other people. You have to answer for man's bad behavior, which is insane. If you point that out, you're accused of complaining. You're supposed to stay pretty for men, but not so pretty that you tempt them too much, or that you threaten other women because you're supposed to be part of a sisterhood. But always stand out and always be grateful, but never forget that the system is rigged. So find a way to acknowledge all of this, but always be grateful. You have to never get old, never be rude, never show off, never be selfish, never fall down, never fail, never show fear, never get out of line. It's too hard. It's too contradictory, and nobody gives you a medal or says thank you. And it turns out, in fact, that not only are you doing everything wrong, but also everything is your fault. I'm just so tired of watching myself and every single other woman tie herself into knots so that people will like us. And if all of that is also true for a doll just representing women, then I don't even know.
That was weird.
End quote for that. While some of this rings true, the movie seems to imply that only women face these challenges, and there is obviously a great divide when it comes to communication across the genders, because here's that same monologue, but from a man's point of view. I'm just putting this out there. It doesn't invalidate the woman's experience, but we have to also consider that she's not the only one having that human experience and those challenges. So from the man's point of view, this is probably what his monologue would sound like. Being a man is simply impossible. Okay, I can't. I'm sorry. I'll just read it normally. But this is what it would be like if he was reading it. You are so strong, so capable, and it devastates me that you don't believe you're sufficient. It feels like we always need to be exceptional, yet somehow we're constantly falling short. You must be fit, but not too fit. You can never admit you want to be muscular because that will seem toxic and insecure. Funny enough, it only seems that way to females. But anyway, you must claim health as your goal. But if you're too into fitness, you're deemed as right-wing or toxic. But at the same time, women who call you that will go for men who look like that. You have to earn well because you're looked at as a provider, but you're also shamed for it. And if you act like the provider, you're accused of not allowing a woman to be independent. Yet, you are also supposed to offer and provide. You must be a leader, but never authoritative, or you're seen as toxic. You have to take charge, but not overrun others' inputs. You're supposed to enjoy fatherhood, but often shouldn't have much say in how the kids are raised. You have no control or say whether or not the woman wants to keep the child, but you also don't get to discipline them as a father if the woman doesn't don't want you to, and then if she divorces you, she takes them and half of everything you have, because most of the time women will go for people who earn more than them, and decides whether or not you get to see them. But yet, you're still supposed to pay for them, whether or not they're in your life, and even if the woman finds another dude. If you're a young man who is the victim of an older woman taking advantage of you as a minor, when you reach 18 and she decides to keep child, you still have to pay child support. You have to be ambitious, yet be there for everyone else. You're held responsible for every man's transgression, which is maddening. But if you challenge that, you're labeled a misogynist. You're expected to remain ruggedly handsome for women, but then you are judged for being privileged because you're handsome. Society is told to have standards, but if you as a man has standards, especially when it comes to women, you're lambasted on the internet and labeled as a monster because how dare you. You're never supposed to have the audacity to comment on a woman's looks or her weight or things that she can change. However, your looks or things about you that you cannot change, winky winky, or immediately used as insults towards you if you simply disagree with something that has nothing to do with your looks. You're told that you're supposed to be more emotional and sensitive and have emotional intelligence, but you send women running for the hills whenever you're like that. You're told not to be too masculine, but women and men don't respect you if you're not. You're expected to be a leader and a provider, but when you step up to the plate to do so, you're faulted for not making everybody's problems immediately go away. Everyone else is allowed to talk about their feelings and express their deal breakers in a relationship, but if you do it, all the media outlets label you as toxic and controlling, even though if women do it, they are heralded. Yet everyone depends on you to uphold society and protect them. But your feelings don't matter because you're just whining if you express them. You're called a man baby if you show the least bit of weakness in this regard. But yet you're also expected to show weakness and be sensitive. The contradictions and double standards are too many, and there's no acknowledgement or appreciation. And when it all comes crashing down, it's not just that you did everything wrong, but also everything is your fault. It's simply exhausting, seeing myself and every other man straining ourselves to fit into a mold that people will approve of. And if a mere doll that represents men is also bound by the same rules, I'm at a loss for words. Anyway, end quote with that. The point I'm trying to make here is that each gender has their own struggles specific to their biology in a society that seems to ignore the very fact, for some reason, that we have biological inclinations and instincts and attractions. This movie seems to eerily highlight that, and it's so creepy because it's like we're still animals, but as we progress, we are being shunned and vilified for being what we are or having the urges and instincts of what make us what we are. It was good on Barbie near the end of the movie to tell Ken that he should know how to be himself without her, and while there were good messages mixed in with the movie, the majority of the overall overtone messages in some ways overshadowed these poignant and meaningful ones. In the end, in my opinion, it did a disservice to both men and women. The movie went in 6 different directions with the messages it was trying to send. Because on one hand, Barbie is liberating. Oh, but on the other hand, she's a white savior fascist. These are names that one of the characters literally call her. On one hand, the men must shine and learn to be themselves, but they can't be too much themselves because it will overshadow the Barbies and threaten them. The Barbies are fighting for their perfect world, but when they learn that it doesn't have to be perfect, they still want to go back to the way it was before, where it was perfect and everybody had the same line of thought and no deviation was encouraged. As a matter of fact, it was seen as disgusting. In the end of the movie, Barbie ends up going to the real world to become human and have a human experience, but it really doesn't seem like a payoff because every Barbie back in Barbie Land is exactly where they were when they started. So she essentially just left them there to continue living their monotonous lives. Now, granted, she was happy with her decision and the Barbies back at Barbie Land made their decision on their own, but they seemed happiest when the Kens introduced a variation and the discontinued Barbies seized the not autonomy from them. They seized that from them, their choice, based on them believing that these Barbies that are going along with the Kens couldn't have possibly made the decision on their own to go along with what the Kens were doing, which was just having fun and enjoying the role of being pampered, which is what the Barbies have been enjoying for many eons since the dawn of their time. This movie has... Listen, this movie has good messages and they're sprinkled throughout. It's sometimes hard to find them, but they're there. But again, in my opinion, the bad messages overshadow those. Again, I don't know what that has to do with politics, but there's a very real conversation that needs to be had about males disrespecting females and devaluing their unique experiences as women. And the same goes for females devaluing the real experiences that men have as men. Not every man that walks down the street is given respect, and for the movie to suggest this is really irresponsible and disingenuous to their audience. And the most insufferable character in the entire movie was the daughter of the main human character, because oh my god, she claims that she's so pro-feminist, but she treats her mom like trash. Like, I could not understand that. I cannot take anything that that character says seriously when you also treat your mother like absolute dirt. How can you be a champion for females when you were treating her the way that you claim men treat women? It makes no sense. And the only thing that was remotely true that the girl said was that men hate women and women hate women equally, so it's the one thing we can agree on. Because most of the situations that are happening with wanting the male gaze or male validation or whatever they say is because women are doing that against each other. They're competing with each other. The men aren't doing it. The woman's over there getting attention and a man wants a woman that is just flat all around. Other women try to do that. If another woman is like 5 years younger than another woman, the older woman's like, I gotta look like that. And it's constantly them trying to compete. Why? It's not for themselves. It's for men validation. The men are not asking them to put on pounds of makeup. Most men don't like that. The women are doing that to compete with the physicality of other women that probably naturally look closer to that. They're trying to put on a suit to disguise themselves as being one of those people. So make it make sense how that is the fault of dudes. But then people don't hold accountable the females who are making those choices on their own because that's what they want. Nobody talks about that. And I feel like if they're trying to aim this at little girls, these little girls are going to grow up being completely unprepared because they're going to start feeling those feelings and they're going to spiral out of control because they're going to think something is wrong with them by simply desiring what this movie is trying to say is toxic to want. Just my opinion. Doesn't mean that I hate anyone who likes the movie. Like, I did have fun with it in certain points. I don't think it's the worst movie ever, but the movie clearly has issues and that was the biggest issue for me. Anyways, thanks so much for watching. This has been Alteori. You asked, we answered.